Hi, I'm Barbara Bernstein from betterteachingnow.com, and I want to give students a few tips that will help them in their schoolwork and to make the work more pleasant and to do better in their classes. This is a little tip. If you are studying something and you've got some equations that you have to apply, and you're going to get a bunch of different problems, and there'll be some problems will use one equation and some will use another, but you had to memorize all those equations. I suggest when the test paper is handed out that the first thing you do is turn it over on the back and write all the equations out. It's easier to remember them correctly before you look at the questions. Because the questions, you start filtering, which equation would I use here? And you start to have other things that crowd your mind, and it can make it harder to recall the equation. While your mind is clear and you can review the equations a little bit before the tests are handed out to make sure you remember them all, first, don't read the questions. They'll make you nervous. Turn them over, the paper over, write your equations. When you have them written out, you feel much more confident. You can take each question, turn it over, look on the back, see which equation seems to apply to that question, and it will relax you, which means you'll be more accurate, make fewer mistakes, and can often go faster. Just a little tip. Don't ever cramp your work, especially if you're doing math. I've seen countless mistakes made because people write their letters words kind of small, the numbers small, and then when they go back, they may mistake a 2 for a 5 or something like that. Everyone's done this. You probably know what I'm talking about. Everyone has done this. You don't see the negative sign or whatever. Write neatly. Paper is not expensive. Use paper. Write your equations down. Don't cramp it to save paper or for any other reason. Write it neatly, one equation after another, or whatever you're doing, if it's a science or a math or whatever. That will make a big difference in your accuracy. Also make sure your negative signs are long enough that you don't miss them when you go back to recopy an equation. And I suggest when you're doing equations that have adding or subtracting positives and negatives, change everything to adding and change the sign of the number appropriately so that a minus a negative becomes plus a positive, minus a positive becomes plus a negative, and so on. It's easier not to make mistakes when the process is always addition. I've seen this many times, trust me on this. And the last tip that I have is don't feel bad about making mistakes. If you could learn something so quickly that you hardly needed to bother the teacher with questions or to show you corrections on things you did, you would barely need a teacher at all, and there would not be as many teachers hired. Some of them would be out of a job. Their job is to help you, correct you, show what's wrong, and so it's really important. You can't get very far if you're always worried about making a mistake. I don't feel bad about my mistakes. I'm definitely going to make some. You're going to make some too. Everyone does. So just see where they are, correct it, and go forward. And try not to make the same mistake again. Next time you make a different mistake. Okay, those are my tips. Hi, I'm Barbara Bernstein from betterteachingnow.com, and this video is to provide some tips for parents in working with their children to get better performance in school. First, I want to say that the most important thing you can do is foster a positive attitude in your children about their mistakes. It is very important that they not be made to feel bad about mistakes, but just rather, okay, what was wrong? Why did I think that? How can I correct it? I have a friend that told me she saw an interview with a woman who was very successful in some business that she ran. And in the interview, she attributed part of her success to the fact that when she came home from school every day, her father would say to her, "What mistakes did you make today?" All excited so that they could take a look at the mistakes together and figure out, what caused them and how they could be avoided the next time around. And that mistakes were kind of considered fun to work with. And I think that that's a very, very helpful outlook. Because if you're worried about making mistakes, you will not venture as much, and then you won't learn as much. I saw a video, and I wish I could give the teacher credit. I don't know who did this, but I was noodling around on the internet for videos that of teachers teaching things. And there was a teacher that did something brilliant. She had a video, and she called this process "My Favorite No." What she did was, students come into class, she's got a problem up on the board. It's not a very long problem. They all sit down and immediately solve the problem, hand it in. And she goes through the problems and she separates them into right and wrong. The ones that are right, she says yes, yes, no. If it was wrong, it goes into the no pile. Yes, no, no, etc. And then she looks through the stack of ones that were done wrong and picks her favorite one, the one that she thinks illustrates a common mistake that people make, that she wants to point out what was wrong and what not to do. She rewrote the problem so the kids couldn't tell from the handwriting whose mistake it was, and says, the student did this and this. They were right this far, but here's where there was a mistake. And she pointed out something that no doubt a lot of students probably make. I mean, if you teach for a while, you see the same mistakes. There's consistent ways that people do things wrong, and you come to know what to expect. So she no doubt was picking things that were helping not just the student that made the mistake, but many students. And I thought that the idea of it being her favorite no, her favorite mistake, was just such a great way to express this attitude that we don't feel bad about our mistakes, we learn from them. And another thing that I could recommend is, try as much as possible to solicit in different situations what your children think, and let them explain why. They don't know as much as an adult, and it's easy to dismiss their opinion of who should be president or whatever it may be under discussion, but you really always want to let them explain their thoughts and the reasoning behind them, because that helps them to learn, essentially, to take a position and defend it logically, or explain why they think what they do. That's a very helpful skill in life. Another thing that I think parents can do is ask their children to read 2 books a month. Reading is one of the most essential tools for learning. I've read research results where you can duplicate all kinds of good instruction. You get the same result in terms of student proficiency and learning if they're just reading. And I think that schools also, English teachers or even other teachers, should just require reading a certain number of books. You can give them a list of good books that are classics or considered good in some sense. And you could either require all the reading to be from that list, make it a big one so they can choose subjects they like, or you could say every other book should be from this list, and then another one you can choose freely. Because you might have a kid that wants to read a book about how to play chess, or the great explorers, and that's not going to be on a classic list of good literature. You want to let them read things they want to read, but of course classic good literature also has a lot of value in terms of their learning vocabulary and understanding things as well. So I really think we missed the boat by not making sure that students are doing a lot of reading. It's a completely free way to drastically improve their education, their performance. I also think that having students play strategy games teaches them several things. If you play a lot of games, there's usually only one winner in a game. So it takes at least 2 people to play a game. So someone is winning 50% of the time or less when they play strategy games, or any game, even if it's just a game of luck like Candyland. So for one thing, it gets people used to not winning, which I think is important, because life is you're not going to win all the time in life. And it's a little bit akin to getting used to making mistakes. It's just things don't always work out as you would have liked, and you just go forward. You might win the game the next time. It also, to the extent that the games have elements of strategy, it teaches logical thinking. So games are really board games are a good way to develop thinking skills.